Okay, we are live, everybody. Welcome to Shir haShirim class number 60. It's amazing we're up to 60 classes. Baruch Hashem. And you can see on the screen, it says the Seattle Kollel, seattlekollel.com. Just to clarify, at the beginning of the class when I announce who is supporting this series, it's the Seattle Kollel. Anyone interested in supporting the Seattle Kollel can go to that address, seattlekollel.com, and see what's on their website. Also, make a contribution through the donation link if you so desire. I'm gonna put another announcement. Another announcement is that I am now, Baruch Hashem, an affiliate partner with artscroll.com. So when you shop at Artscroll and you put in this code that is coming on the screen, Rebbe Rafi, one word, REBBIRAFI, at checkout. So a percentage of the proceedings will go towards supporting this channel and the Torah that we teach here. So if you like my work and my teaching and you want to chip in, just make some purchases at ArtScroll and enhance your Jewish library anyway. And while you're at it, a few pennies will drop into our pocket over here, which helps us out. So keep that in mind. And fine, without further ado, we've got some wonderful guests in our live studio this evening, and I'm gonna put there should be a link. There should be a link in the chat window, I believe. There should be a link to join live in the studio if you want to do so. And otherwise, we're happy for all those viewers on YouTube. And we welcome questions and comments both from the live studio and in the YouTube comments. We will go ahead and share the text on the screen and begin the class. Always feel free to interrupt. Share Chrome tab. Here we go. Add this. Okay, I'm going to enlarge that text for you. All right, there it is. Okay, I'm just gonna mute the mics in the studio so that there isn't background noise. But if for whatever reason you're not able to unmute your mic when you want to speak, like wave your hand or something, and I'll unmute you. Okay, so we were last time we were in verse number 6. Verse number 6, which says as follows. It says, "Your head is upon you like Carmel." Your head is upon you like Carmel, which is a mountain in the land of Israel. Your head is upon you like Mount Carmel, which we said was a praise of the mitzvah of tefillin, the phylacteries, the leather boxes which contain scrolls with portions of the Torah inside them that are strapped onto the head, and there's one for the arm as well, which Jewish men traditionally will wear during morning prayers. And that mitzvah of tefillin, of strapping these Torah scrolls onto one's head and hand. So this is described here as your head is upon you like Carmel. Carmel being a very strong and mighty mountain. And we saw the description, how the Torah describes these tefillin, these phylacteries of the head specifically, because those are visible at the top of the head. The one that's on the arm is usually concealed in a sleeve. So the visible tefillin of the head is supposed to strike fear in our enemies. So it's our strength and our might, and therefore it's compared to Mount Carmel. And we did a beautiful class last week about the significance of Mount Carmel and why it's highlighted and you'll have to go back to that class for more detail. And that's about as far as we got. There was a lot of material just on that. The verse continues, Vidalas roshech ka'ar gaman, and that which is suspended upon your head is like argaman, which is like a royal purple color, and this refers to wool, which was dyed in this purple color. So what is suspended upon your head, we'll see, is the braids of your hair. The braids of your hair, which are on your head like a crown, are so beautiful that they're compared to this beautiful color when it's dyed into wool. And then the final phrase, Melech asur ba'rehatim. The king is bound in rehatim, which we said could have two meanings. A rahat, really like as a verb, is used to mean to run. And as a noun, it means a sort of a stream, something which is running, as it were, like running water. And here it's referring to, Rashi says, the hair, the flowing hair, because a rahat is a stream, it's a flow. So in this context, it refers where it's praising her head and her hair. It says the king is bound in the flow of the hair, which sounds like the king, who's Hashem, is so taken with this beauty that he's sort of bound to her by the beauty of her hair. And we'll see an additional meaning to that soon. But let's go a little into the details of this second phrase. The hair which is braided over your head is like purple wool. So let's see that in the commentary. Please feel free to stop to comment or question at any time. Okay, Rashi says here, the braids of the hair of your crown, klias sa'aros nizirayech, the braid of the hair of your crown. A nazir is a crown, okay? But also, the word nizirayech is very reminiscent, or if not, it's really explicit, of another word from the Torah, which is very well known. Who knows what word this is? Nizirayach means your nazir. Anyone know what a nazir is?
Yeah, Nazir is the person who's taken a special vow to.
Right. That's right. So the nazir is known as the Nazirite, the one who takes a Nazirite vow, the vow of Nazir. So what is that vow? Cliff, you want to tell us more about it?
I don't know a whole lot about it other than the fact that it's a kind of an enhanced form of observance, an enhanced form of piety.
Right.
They don't take something about making shvuot, anyway, yeah, that's pretty much what I know. They won't cut their hair. They will. They're a nazir for about a year, I think, is a typical period or something like that, and then they.
So
they
it
have
could
to
be
wash
for any
before.
amount of period, minimum 30 days. Oh, we lost our text over here, but I wanna welcome Menachem to the class. I hope I'm not
Hey,
embarrassing you.
so so I have a question. Rafi, is there some type of carbon you have to make in the base of Mikdash after you're through with your Naziris?
Yes, there are sacrifices
That's
that.
Meseches Yoma.
Oh, say that again.
It's Meseches Yoma.
Well, Maseches Yoma deals with a lot of sacrifices. There's a whole Masechta, there's a whole tractate just on Nazir. So the laws of the Nazirite are given in detail in tractate Nazir. I'm not expert in it, but there are sacrifices that he brings afterwards. Though I'm not prepared to speak in detail about that here. Unless you had a follow-up comment or question about it.
No, I was just Cliff had a very good question, and I was trying to expound on that question.
So it is noteworthy. It is noteworthy that
hey, Cliff.
It's noteworthy that there's my
What are you
text.
doing? Sorry,
Baruch Hashem.
I was
It's
on mute.
it's noteworthy that the Nazir brings a sin offering after the end of his Nazirite period, and the commentaries ask, why does he bring a sin offering? In other words, what was the sin? And there are two views, and they're almost exclusive of one another. One view is so let's just rewind a little bit. The Nazirite makes a vow to refrain from wine and all grape products, as well as refraining from cutting his hair, as well as refraining from coming in contact with the dead, which renders a certain level of impurity. So he's not allowed to become impure through contact with the dead. He may not drink wine or grape products, and he may not cut his hair. So removing himself from wine so he doesn't become intoxicated and then, in his state of lightheadedness, act in improperly. So because he's guarding himself from that, he takes a vow from wine, grows his hair in order not to be concerned with his physical appearance, with grooming, etc. And of course, the spiritual aspect of purity that he vows to keep himself in. Whereas these may be of value in Judaism, they're not an obligation. A Jew is permitted to drink wine within certain limits, and it's even considered helpful in enhancing spirituality in its proper framework. A person is certainly permitted to cut one's hair, although one should not be overly vain. So that's a value, and there is an advantage to being in a state of spiritual purity, and one cannot enter the temple in a state of impurity. And in the temple times, we had to guard ourselves to a certain level of impurity because of foods we would touch and all kinds of other complicated laws that applied in temple times. So those were things that it wasn't forbidden for us to become impure, but purity was kind of necessary for the lifestyle of a Jew who's interacting with temple practice. So here he actually vows to do these things. And some say that the sin is that in not indulging in wine and in removing himself from even physical beauty, a person is removing himself from pleasures of the world that Hashem wants us to experience. Hashem wants us to experience physical bodily pleasures, such as we can experience from wine and such as we can experience from physical beauty. Although those can lead one, when it's taken to too much of an extreme, away from spirituality and away from Hashem. But the ideal model of Judaism is to combine the physical and the spiritual in a balance, which allows one to enjoy both the physical world and also elevate it to attach oneself spiritually to Hashem. So it's considered perhaps sinful for a person to refrain from enjoying those benefits that Hashem wants a person to enjoy. He might have felt it was necessary for himself because he gets carried away and he was afraid of what sins he might be led into. And so it's legitimate and it's permitted in the Torah to do so. But in order to indicate that it's not ideal, the ideal way is to be able to balance all these things, physical and spiritual. So he brings a sin offering when it's done. There's an opposing view to this, which is no. His sin is in ending his vow. When a person dedicates himself to God on such a level that he's taken on this elevated status, this enhanced service, as Cliff put it, to leave that level and descend back down to earth with the rest of us is seen as negative. So he brings a sin offering for descending from his vow. Those views do see somewhat in competition with each other, and I'll say there's a place for this and there's a place for that, and like everything else, we need balance, and a person needs to know when to look at things this way and when to look at things that way, or which individuals need to follow this course and which individuals need to follow that course, and that's not something we're going to hammer out right now. But it's an interesting. You brought up the offering, so it was a worthwhile point to make. Going back to the text, it says, the braids of the hair of your nizirayach, of your Nazarism. Now, the root of the word nazir is nezer, and a nazer is a crown. It's another word for a crown. So it's sort of like when a person elevates himself to this higher level, he's seen as kind of wearing a crown. He's made himself a certain kind of royalty with his spiritual status. And so here it's physically depicting, he's got this long hair. He or she, a man or a woman, could be a Nazirite, a Nazir or a Nizirah for a woman. That, what do they do with the long hair? They braid it. So the braids of the hair of the Nazirite, says God, is na'ah, is beautiful. Scroll. Na'a b'mitzvos, it's beautiful in mitzvos. Keklias argaman, like a braid of this royal color purple wool. So the beauty of the hair of the Nazirite in his elevated spiritual status is so beautiful to God that it's to him like the beauty of braided purple wool, which is a very beautiful kind of colored hair. Any questions on that interpretation? Oh, the text disappeared again. I don't know why that keeps happening. I keep losing the text view. So, okay, I have a comment here. If no one else has a comment, I have a comment, which is, someone commented in the private chat. They said Samson and Samuel were both Nazirites. Samuel was one from birth. Samson as well was one from birth. Samson and Samuel were both Nazirites from birth. Now, there's a question whether Samuel was a Nazirite. It's not explicit in the text, but it is one reading of the text where it says, Mora lo yala al rosho, that Mora may not come up upon his head. And that is the same language as with Samson. And there it clearly means a blade. A Mora is a kind of a blade. A blade may not come upon his head, meaning he cannot shave his head. He cannot cut his hair. The same word is used with Samuel, but I think with a slightly different spelling. One is with an aleph and one is with a hey. So with a hey, I believe it refers to, I'm not sure which is which. One of them refers to a blade, and the other one could be read as Mora, like with an aleph, for example. Mora would mean fear. Mora with an aleph rather than a hey means fear. So fear should not come over his head, meaning he should not fear any man. And then it could also be spelled with a hey. This is why, without looking, I'm not sure, because a Mora with a hey is a Mora could mean a master. There should be no master over him. There should be no fear over him, meaning he shall fear no man, fear no master other than God himself. That's what it says about Samuel. So there's a question whether it means he was literally a Nazirite like Samson and no blade would come upon his head, or the reading is no fear or no master shall come upon his head. He shall fear no one other than God. That's a questionable reading in Samuel. But yes, one reading is that he was a Nazirite. And both Samson and Samuel would have been Nazirites from birth. That's a comment in the private chat. Now, here in Rashi's language, he says this. He says, I don't want to scroll up all that way. He says it's beautiful b'mitzvos. It's beautiful in mitzvos, like the braided purple wool. Now, why doesn't he just say it's beautiful in braided purple wool? Why do you say it's beautiful in mitzvos? So you want to say because it's a mitzvah, the mitzvah of the Nazirite, that when he chooses to take upon this voluntary elevated status and he takes upon himself these additional commands or these additional obligations of not eating or drinking wine, not cutting his hair, not becoming impure from a dead body. Maybe that's what it's beautiful in that it includes more mitzvos, and therefore that elevated status makes it stand out among your hair. Going back to the parable, the metaphor, he's describing the woman's hair is beautiful. These hairs that are braided up on your head, they're like purple wool, representing the specialness of the Nazarite. But I question that language of Rashi, of why he says it's beautiful in mitzvos. Because again, Nazarite, it has certain laws and obligations, but would you count it as multiple mitzvos? I don't know that you would. I didn't look actually in the Sefer HaChinuch or any of these books that literally count the commandments in the Torah to see if he counts Nazarite as multiple. It didn't occur to me that it is. So it was a little bit of a strange language for me. So I gave it some thought. I don't know if anyone hears the question at all and wants to offer an answer, but I'm open to hearing. Otherwise, I'll share my own thought on the subject. So my thought over here was that it's beautiful in mitzvos was a reference, perhaps. I'm reading my own notes now, which I put on the screen. I made a note here that I thought maybe it was a reference to earlier on in Shir haShirim when he describes her hair and the beauty of her hair. Rashi makes the comments that the beauty of her hair represents the empty ones among Israel. That even the emptiest Jews are full of mitzvah performance, and even the children are full of mitzvahs. And that was the representation of the hair as being very, very thin. So you could take a Jew who you see as being very thin and wispy like a hair as far as what you think his level of observance is. And God looks closely and he says, you see a wispy hair, but I see something that's full of merit. So maybe over here, the reference to the hair was a reference to the mitzvos. Why multiple mitzvos? Because the hair represents a person who you thought, doesn't have mitzvos, but I'm highlighting the fact that they do have mitzvos. So when speaking about the hair, he's maybe going back to that symbolism of the hair as a symbol when God praises its beauty, as a symbol for that which you think is thin, I can see is full of mitzvos. Maybe that is the meaning, and it's sort of it's a metaphor within a metaphor, that since the Nazir, the Nazarite, is someone who performs a mitzvah with his hair. In other words, how do you tell a Nazarite? You don't see him eating, unless you are, but you just look at him on the street. You don't see him eating or not eating, what he's eating, what he's not eating, what he's refraining from, wine, not wine. You can't see if he's pure or impure as far as spiritual contamination from the dead. But what you can see is his hair. The hair is the physical sign of the Nazarite. So in describing the beauty of the woman, which is related to her hair, in as much as it represents that those Jews who appear very thin to us like hair are actually full of mitzvos, God describes the hair in the terms of the mitzvah that is remarkable in the hair, and that is the mitzvah of Nazir. So yes, he's praising the mitzvah of Nazir, but he's also using the mitzvah of Nazir as a metaphor of praise for the Jewish people in general, who are full of mitzvos, even when they are those who appear to us to be thin as a hair. So it's all one big praise that God is praising the Jewish people, who even the thinnest among them are full of mitzvos, by praising the hair, by describing it as one of the mitzvos of the hair, which is Nazir. And that's why Rashi uses this language of, it is beautiful in mitzvos. It's beautiful in that this hair is representative of so many mitzvos, just as the Nazarite performs a mitzvah with his hair. And that's why Rashi uses mitzvos in the plural over there. Now, I had I took one other swing of the bat at what Rashi was doing with the word b'mitzvos. It's beautiful in mitzvos, and that is to say that perhaps the vowelization that we're looking at, which, full disclosure, I copied and pasted the text into a Google Doc from Sefaria.com, and I'm using their vowel points. Now, Rashi didn't write with vowel points, and at some point, someone decided to add in the vowel points in Rashi based on how he was understanding the text. But even though the vowel points that are added here by someone says b'mitzvos, in mitzvos, it's possible that the correct vowelization is ba mitzvos rather than b mitzvos. And the difference between ba mitzvos, meaning with an a vowel rather than an I sound, is ba mitzvos adds the definite article. So it would mean in the mitzvos. It's beautiful in the mitzvos, which means that would totally change the translation to mean not it's beautiful in mitzvos or with mitzvos, beautiful with mitzvos, but rather meaning it would be beautiful among the mitzvos. Among all the mitzvos, this one stands out in its beauty as the purple wool, in as much as it is a mitzvah of the hair, and therefore it beautifies the hair. So this beauty of the hair, which is the mitzvah of the hair, is described as this beautiful wool, which is similar to hair. So among the mitzvos, this one is beautiful like braided purple wool. So then we would change the vowels from in or with mitzvos to in, among the mitzvos. Fine. Those are my thoughts about why Rashi words it this way, that it's beautiful in mitzvos. So we say like it's a representative of the Jewish people who have many mitzvos, and we spoke about how the hair represents that, or it's supposed to be vowelized among the mitzvos. This one having to do with the hair is beautiful like purple wool. Okay. Any questions or comments on anything I've said until now? Okay.
Just sorry.
Yeah, Ronald, go ahead.
So there's people in Israel that still take the Nazarite vow today.
Could someone take the Nazarite vow today? To my
No,
knowledge,
do they? Do they?
do they? I don't know anyone who does. I don't know anyone who does.
Yeah.
I have heard of people who are known as Nazarites. I have heard of such people, but it's very difficult for me to imagine, considering number one, we don't have a temple today, so they wouldn't be able to bring the offerings. Number two, everyone today is considered contaminated with the impurity of the dead, because we have essentially no way of removing that impurity, for which we needed the ashes of a red heifer, which is not available for us right now.
No.
So because we are not particular about this level of impurity, we proceed on the assumption that we've all in some way or other come in contact with the dead, either by meaning doesn't mean you have to literally touch the cadaver, but even if you're in the same building as a cadaver, you would the Torah tells us that being within the same canopy renders the impurity to everyone underneath that canopy. So whether you entered a cemetery and walked over a grave, that would convey the impurity. If you walked underneath a tree branch that some of the branches were hanging over a grave, you would be contaminated by the canopy. If you were in a building like a hospital where there was a cadaver, some people even concerned about planes flying over cemeteries, that the impurity travels upwards without limit, so in that spot. So because there isn't really a practical way to remove this contamination today, we aren't really able, to my knowledge, to observe this. I could be wrong. In other words, it could be that, all right, maybe I can't bring the offering, but if I can't, that's not my fault, and therefore I'm not required. Maybe like a priest today, I mean a Kohen, a Jewish person of the priestly line, a Kohen, who is not permitted to enter a cemetery because the Torah forbids him from becoming contaminated by a dead body. So he cannot enter, he can't go into a place where there's a cadaver, a building. He can't go into a cemetery, etc. He avoids those things to the extent that he can. Maybe that would be the same for a Nazarite today. Nevertheless, I've never met a Nazarite. I've only heard that there have been such people in modern times, but I'm not aware that this is something that is done today. You know,
Okay.
even the people that I heard that were Nazarites, it may be almost like a borrowed term. I don't know that they literally took the Nazarite vow. It could be wrong, but just that they have, like maybe they've vowed off those things which they could. Like maybe they took a vow from wine. Maybe they took a vow to grow their hair. And again, maybe they act similar to a Kohen, not to enter a cemetery, etc. But a full-fledged Nazarite, I'm not aware that it's done today. So that's a good question, but it's certainly not a practice which is normative to do, if it can be done at all. And I don't have certainty on that
Can I say something?
question. Any other questions?
Rabbi?
Okay, so moving forward, now let's get to the king is bound in the flow. We said the flow of the hair. He's captivated by the beauty of her hair, like one who's just he's tied up, he's bound, and the imagery like the hair is rope like, so it's being used as a metaphor for literally tying him with the beauty of the hair. So Rashi takes it even further. He says something very beautiful. He says, Shemo shel makom kashur bataltalim. The name of God is bound in the locks of hair. The name of God is bound in the locks of hair. What does that mean? Shenamar, as it says, and he quotes a verse in Numbers chapter 6, verse 7, which is regarding the Nazarite. In that section, it says, Nazer Elokov al Rosho. The Nazir, again, the word Nazir, Nazarite, from Nazir meaning crown. The crown of his God is upon his head. And as it says, he's forbidden from doing these things because the crown of God is upon his head. Now, let me see. Did I put a footnote there? Footnote 18. Here's the verse. To his father and to his mother, to his brother and to his sister, he may not become contaminated when they die, meaning it is normally the obligation of the next of kin to take care to bury the dead in their family. But in the case of the Nazarite, even if his father, mother, brother, sister would die, he would be forbidden from becoming contaminated by handling their burial. He would have to get someone else to do it. You'd have to arrange it, but to be physically performed by someone else. Now, this is remarkable because even a Kohen, someone who is, again, of priestly lineage, who's forbidden to become contaminated to the dead, is obligated to bury his father, mother, brother, sister, and spouse, even though he'll become contaminated, meaning for him, this overrides the obligation to bury his immediate relative, overrides his prohibition of becoming contaminated to the dead. The only exception is the high priest himself. The high priest may not become contaminated by his immediate family in their burial. So the statement here in the Torah is essentially that the level of sanctity that the Nazarite has is equivalent in this way to the high priest himself. And the reason given is because Ki Nezer Elokav al Rosho, because the crown of his God is upon his head. Now, that's obviously not physical, there's no physical crown, but in other words, by elevating himself in this way, it is as though he is wearing a crown, so to speak, of God, a divine crown, a holy crown. And so this, him being crowned by God, in this special elevated spiritual way, prevents him from doing these things. Now, on that verse, I wanted to share with you a beautiful comment of the Ibn Ezra, one of the classic commentators, Rabbi Avraham Ibn Ezra, or we would say Ben Ezra, son of Ezra, but he was known by his Arabic name Ibn Ezra, the son of Ezra. He says, and know that every person, kol b'nei adam, every human being, avdei ta'avas ha'olam. He is, he is a servant of the desires of this world. Every human being is, so to speak, a slave to the desires of this world. V'hamelech, but the king, Be'emes, the true king. Who is the true king? Sheyesh lo nezer va'ateres malchus barosho. The true king who has the crown of kingship upon his head. He's not the slave. Is what? Kol mi shehu chafshi minatavos. Is a person who is free of desires and appetites. Meaning our natural state, the natural state of the human being is to be a slave to his desires like an animal. Like an animal. He's a physical being with a physical animalistic body and physical animalistic drives. And like an animal, we have an instinct to pursue these drives. And that's our natural state. But a person can make himself not a slave. Who's not a slave? Who's not a servant? Who's not a subject? A king. A king is a person who's not subject to someone else. So who is the king? The king is the one who has control over his desires. He's a master of desires. He's free from the bondage of his physical carnal drives. And so that person who is able to master and conquer his physical drives, such a person is a king. So he says that's why the verse describes him as someone with the crown of God upon his head. He is a person who has separated himself from certain physical attachments, the wine, the influence of alcohol, the vanity of grooming one's hair and physical beauty, etc. So such a person, he's a king. He has the crown of God upon his head, and so therefore, he becomes forbidden from contaminating himself to the dead, even to his own family. Beautiful idea. So the crown of God is upon his head. So this is what's being described here. The braids, which form like a crown on the head of the hair of the Nazarite, are so beautiful, like the royal purple color that a king wears. And therefore, the king, well, let's go back to the verse. The king is bound in the hair. So that's what Rashi says. What does it mean? The king is bound in the flow of the hair. Where were Rashi's comments? Right? He says, right, the name of God is bound in the locks of hair, as it says, the crown of his God is upon his head. So that's the idea. When a person elevates himself above his attachment to physical pleasures and desires, he takes himself out of the slavery and servitude of his lower form and elevates himself to mastery, to kingship. He becomes, in a certain way, godlike, one who's removed from physical earthly desires. So the crown of God is upon his head. Melech asor ba'rehotim. The king is bound in the flow of hair. Okay. Any questions on that? Comments?
Just a simple one, I hope. So we wouldn't know what those braids look like today?
There's no specific braid. In other words, the Torah doesn't say a Nazarite must braid his hair, and therefore, how do you braid it this way? It's any generic braid you want to make. The idea being, if he has long hair, and rather than it being disheveled, so he braids it to sort of keep it out of the way, right? Okay. And it's not a requirement. He could have disheveled hair, but here in this poem, we're giving a description of beauty. So we have a description of her hair and the hair that's suspended up upon her head, and Rashi describes that as the braids, and it's representative of the Nazarite status. So somebody put in the private comments, the private chat, you couldn't hear me. That's true, I couldn't hear you. I was trying to say Rabbi David Cohen, who lived 1884 to 1972, was known as the Nazir of Jerusalem. Yes, that's the person I was thinking of. I had heard about this person per an article on Chabad.org. Yes, he was known as a very close disciple of Rav Kook, the famous Rav Kook, the Rav Kook. And he was the famous Nazirite. But he was known as the Nazir. That's what I'm saying. He was known as the Nazir, but I don't know that there was a Nazirite vow on the level of the Torah there, because again, we don't see that people do it anymore. And I think technically there would be issues with doing such a thing nowadays. It said, but the article agreed with all you said. That's right. That's right. That's right. You heard it here. Now, another, were we holding in time? Okay. Another item. Rashi says another beautiful interpretation of rehatim. Again, the flow. The king is bound in the flow. Rashi said the flow of the hair. But it could have other meanings, as we said. Rashi says another meaning here, which is very beautiful. He says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Nikshar, the Holy One, blessed is He, is bound, is tied, is connected, Be'ahava, with love, B'mitzvos, through the commandments, Uveritzos, and through the runnings, Sha'atem Ratzim Lefanav, that you are running before Him. Meaning, when is God bound to us? When is God connected to us? Not connected with the hair per se, but Melech Asur Barahatim, the king is bound in the, like I said before, the runnings. What's the runnings? When we run to fulfill God's command, when we run with enthusiasm to fulfill God's will, when we go energetically, enthusiastically, with alacrity, zirizus, and we perform God's mitzvahs with great fervor and love, that running, that rushing to perform God's will, God is bound to us with that. He becomes connected to us and tied to us and totally enwrapped in love with us. So that's the idea of God is bound in the running. When we are running to perform God's will, that is what connects us to God in the strongest, most beloved way. What a beautiful idea. And again, that could also be connected with hair, in as much as the hair is a flow, and the flow and running, it could all dovetail together. Okay, any comments, questions? Menachem got knocked out of the stream. Yitzchak got knocked out of the stream. I want to put you back in there. If you don't want to be in the stream, don't mind me. But in case you wanted to speak, we wouldn't be able to hear you if you weren't in the stream. So the stream, the flow, Ratim, that's what we're doing. It's a live stream. Melech Asur Ratim, the Hashem is bound in the live stream. Let's hope we have Hashem with us. I mean, certainly we have Hashem with us, but with a special closeness, we hope. Let's go weiter. We have a few more minutes. We have 10 or so minutes here's all my notes, blah, 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 to go to the next verse, which would be great because that was only half a verse. Okay, verse number 7. Oh, also, I really misled you in what I said before. Now it's Melech Asur B'Haratim. The king is bound in the. All that praise, we're going to see, all that praise was the nations. Again, we forgot to introduce. Chapter 7 is the praise of the nations for the Jewish people in exile. And we did everything leading up to these verses. So those are praises of the beauty of Israel from the perspective of the nations. This is the beauty they see in us. They see the beauty of the Nazirite as elevating us and connecting us with God. They see the beauty of the Jewish people in their running and enthusiastic performance of the mitzvos as being beloved and connecting us to God. That's all obvious for them to see. This is their praise. Just wanted to bring that out because we're going to sort of eventually move on from the praise of the nations, but we're still in it. Okay, so verse 7 as follows. Ma yofis uma noamt ahava bata'anugim, means ma yofis, how beautiful you are, uma noamt, and how pleasant you are, ahava bata'anugim, love in pleasures. Okay, I'm just translating literally. Ahava means love. Ta'anug is a pleasure. Ta'anugim, or like a delight. Ta'anugim are pleasures or delights, and ba ta'anugim, right, are in the or with the delights. Ahava b'ta'anugim, love in the delights or love with the delights. So how beautiful you are and how pleasant you are, love with the delights. A little bit difficult to understand. We're going to understand it now. Please feel free to interrupt with questions or comments at any time. We have a comment from Chris. Badwin from here in my home state of Texas. I was wondering if you could enlarge the text from time to time. Okay, so granted that it's not super large, I have myself enlarged. The other option of the view is something like this. Okay, and that would be enlarging the text. The reason that I shied away from that view is because it sort of becomes a very static and unmoving image on the screen, which isn't super captivating to look at. So, because I try to be sort of animated speaker, and I took a little survey of the group when we made that change of what do we prefer, the small text with large presenter or small presenter with large text. I believe the group agreed that the larger presenter is more interesting to follow than the small static text, and that's why I do it that way. So I try to enlarge it as much as I can inside that window, but I'm sorry if it isn't like super big. It's true, I grant it, especially if you're not watching on a large screen. But I am reading everything out and explaining it, so you shouldn't miss what's in the text. Okay, I will excuse you. Thank you. So, and again, switching back and forth is just logistically a little challenging for me to juggle all those variables during the class, so I just kind of leave it in this view.
What about up here? Because these are at 100%. Can that be increased like 10%? Would that interfere then?
To increase what 10%?
The text. It's like what I'm seeing. It's the whole box and the toolbar above it, and it's like
yeah, I don't know how to remove the toolbar. I would like
no,
to.
But I mean, no, but on the scroll bar, it's saying it's 100% with a drop down to increase or decrease.
Yeah, but if if I would increase it, I'll show you what'll happen.
Yeah, I was just saying 10% because that's not a great deal. But
then what happens is
you lose a line or
part
two.
of the text gets cut off.
Yeah, okay, no worries. Just that I noticed that
I
earlier.
put in a manual number. What if I did 1?
Can I say something?
Yeah, please, you should say something.
I noticed that a very bright person had you on their TV on the YouTube app, which would make the text quite large.
Right. If you have a large display, like if you're Chromecasting this or whatever to like a television monitor, you would see more. But I'm limited in the options they give. I can't customize the size of this window where you see the text. It's either this size or this size, and then I become super small. I can't really make it more proportional that like we're sharing the screen more equally.
Go ahead.
It's on a full screen on a 24-inch monitor, which I've got behind my laptop. On the full screen, it's quite large and legible there if you can read Hebrew, which I can't. So on a computer monitor of 24 inch, it's very good, and clear.
I think on your standard computer monitor, if you enlarge, if you full screen the video,
it's very good.
It's pretty clear. So okay, so the next verse, let's take a look at the commentary. It says like this: "Maya fisumana amt, how beautiful and how pleasant. Acher sheparat kilus kol aver ve'aver." After it detailed the praise of each and every body part, kol al kol davar. It now is describing the totality. Now it's describing the totality, going from particular piece by piece to the totality. How beautiful are you in totality, and how pleasant are you, says Rashi, umano amt lidabeik bach, to attach oneself to you. And again, this is the praise of the nations. Ahava hahogenes lehisaneg ba. This is a love which is fitting that one should delight in it. So how beautiful you are in your totality, how pleasant you are to attach oneself to you. This is a love that is fitting to delight in. Okay, that's basic ahava bata, a love in delights. So I had some questions on this, which was my footnote number 19. Is what is Rashi gaining by telling me this is a love that is fitting to delight in, as opposed to just saying this is a love that's delightful, a love that is delightful. It's full of delight. A love that's full of delight. Delights plural. What does he mean by it is fitting to delight in? Okay, so so I what I conjectured here, I put in my notes over here, that there are two terms here. There's how beautiful and how pleasant. And what's the difference between beauty and pleasantness? Okay, anyone? What's the difference between beauty and pleasantness? Anyone?
Behavior and versus looks.
Oh, very good. Thank you, Ronald. So beauty is your looks, beauty is external, but pleasantness is kind of your personality. Pleasantness is, like you said, your behavior. It's more of your character. It's more intrinsic. Beauty is sort of external, and pleasantness is internal. So there's two praises here. There's a praise of her external beauty, and there's a praise of her internal beauty. So one is beauty external, one is pleasant internal. And so therefore it's described as this is a love that's fitting. It's fitting. Now again, fitting, the way we describe a person who is like an upstanding good person is we say a person who is hagun. He's hagun. He is sort of fitting. He's a fitting individual. So the idea of saying this is a love which is hahogenes, that same term of fitting, to delight in, is because this is not a superficial love. Superficial love of just like a love at first sight, kind of like I see you and I'm attracted to what's outside of you, and it's skin deep and it's superficial. That's not a love that's fitting to delight in, because that could be all wrong. You don't know what's on the inside. You shouldn't be judging by the outside. Rather, it's ahava hogenes. It's a love that is fitting, meaning it's of that which is upstanding about the person, that which is intrinsic to the person, internal to the person, their actual character traits. So because it has those two qualities, and that's why it's called ta'anugim, delights, a love of delights. There's the physical delight on the outside, the beauty, but there's also what's internal. And only when there is that internal element of personal beauty of the character, not just beauty of the external, that is a beauty that's fitting. That is a beauty that's a love. Excuse me. That's a love that's fitting. That's a love that's appropriate. The love that is advocated by the Torah is not one based on external. It's based on internal. Now, external is certainly an added plus. If a person's physically beautiful, that certainly can add to the affection in the relationship, but it's not the main attraction, as it were. For a Jew, the main attraction should be the soul connection. The main attraction is that what's internal. And since there is what's internal, therefore we can celebrate both together. Like we continue to say, the synthesis of the physical and the spiritual, that is the ideal. So mayofis, the physical beauty, manoamt, the spiritual beauty, this together is ahava bata anugim. It's a love with two kinds of delights, plural, ta'anugim, delights, physical and spiritual. And that, Rashi says, that's a fitting sort of love. That's the correct, the proper form of love. Okay. Where are we? We're at 9:01. Okay. So the next part is really, really beautiful. There's enough there that we can save it for next time. We're basically at the end of the hour. So that brings us to the end. To sum up, we had the hair, the purple wool represented of the Nazirite, the Nazirite elevation. It's the crown of God upon his head, that he's not a slave to his passions, but he is committed to his attachment to God and is able to elevate himself above his physical drives. God is bound to a person through this connection, and also we said through the flow or the running of a Jew's enthusiasm, or any individual, a Ben Noach's and a Noahide enthusiasm in his service of God. That running towards the service of God binds God to him, and we had in verse 7 the physical beauty combined with the spiritual beauty. That's the synthesis and the harmony that is the ideal for the Jew, and that relationship with God that's based both on a balance of the enjoyment of the physical world together with a spiritual core and a spiritual root connecting to God in those ways. That is the ideal love, which is a love in combination of both types of delights, and that is the fitting sort of love that we want in our relationship with Hashem, and stands as a model also in how we relate also to one another, not through purely external views, but through a view of a person's true character, their beauty and their pleasantness. Okay, we'll pause it here.
Many thanks, Rabbi.
Yeah, thank you all for attending. We have okay, I'm getting a call from my wife, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to end the broadcast. Everybody have a great night.
You too.
You too.
Bye-bye.